Welcome back to Scripture Horror. Tonight we're heading deep into Alaska's national parks, and believe me, what waits out there is far more terrifying than any storm or grizzly. These are real stories from real people. A teacher on a simple family camping trip, a nurse hoping for a peaceful vacation, a mechanic taking his wife and child to see the glaciers, a teenager trying to prove he could survive alone, a park ranger just doing his everyday duties, a photographer on assignment, a survival instructor leading a class, and a truck driver making one routine delivery. 8 ordinary people. 8 journeys into Alaska. But something was already waiting for them in that wilderness. Something that changed their lives forever. What did they encounter? What watched them from the trees? And why did some of them say they wish they had never returned? If you want to know, hit that subscribe button and turn off the lights. Let's begin with the first story. My name is Susan Martinez, and I've been teaching elementary school for years. Kids see the world in clean, bright colors. Good or bad, happy or sad, truth or lies. No gray areas. I used to envy that simplicity. I used to believe life worked that way. I used to believe my own family worked that way. But everything changed last summer in Denali National Park. Everything I believed about my family, everything I believed about myself, collapsed the moment the ground beneath us thawed and decided to tell the truth. I teach 3rd grade at Lincoln Elementary in Sacramento. Every day I tell my kids about honesty and family values. I put posters on my classroom walls that say things like, "Honesty is the best policy," and "Family first." I said those phrases like they were facts, like they were as stable as the earth under my feet. I thought I came from a good, solid, loving family whose roots were deep and strong. But roots can be tangled. Roots can hide things. And sometimes, when ice begins to melt, the things buried underneath rise up whether you're ready for them or not. My grandmother Rosa turned years old last July, and all she wanted was a family camping trip in Alaska, like the ones we'd taken when I was a kid. She said Denali was a part of our blood, part of our story. "Your great-grandfather built his cabin here before this land became protected parkland," she always told us. She talked about the place with such reverence it felt sacred, magical, like we belonged there. So all of us went, my parents, my brothers and their wives, my sister and her teenage daughter Maya, plus all the little cousins. Over people in total. We rented a large campsite near the Teklanika River, and the ranger said we were lucky to get it. Most people book years ahead. The weather in late July was perfect warm in the day, crisp at night. We arranged our tents in a circle like always, and Grandma Rosa sat in the middle in her camping chair, wrapped in her favorite shawl, watching us set up like she was guarding old memories. She told stories about her father Carlos, about how smart he was, how he picked the perfect spot. But she never explained why this place meant so much. Not really, not the part that mattered. Maya, my year-old niece, wasn't interested in family history. Her phone had no signal, so after an hour of complaining, she wandered off, looking for something to do. "Aunt Susan, come look at this," she called from behind the tents. I walked over and found her standing beside a collection of rocks arranged in a neat rectangle, moss-covered but unmistakably intentional. They were the size and shape of a cabin foundation. Maya asked if it was where the old cabin once stood. I knelt down and brushed away dirt. Beneath the moss were concrete foundation stones. My stomach tightened. We'd camped here dozens of times and somehow never realized the cabin had been right beside us. "Grandma," I called. Maya found something. She approached slowly, leaning on her cane. When she saw the stones, her face drained of color. "Oh," she whispered. I didn't think. The ground has shifted this much. But it wasn't the ground. The foundation stones weren't newly exposed. They'd been there, waiting. That was the first sign something was wrong. Maya kept searching around the stones like it was a treasure hunt. She pulled up rusty nails, pieces of wood, an old tin coffee pot. Then she found it. The corner of a brown object poking out of the dirt. We dug with our hands until a leather suitcase emerged. Heavy. Old. But shockingly preserved, the leather dark but not rotted, the metal clasps rusted yet intact. "Should we open it?" Maya asked. I hesitated. I looked at Grandma. Her hands were trembling on her cane. "Don't open it," she said softly. "Put it back." But teenagers don't listen when their excitement takes over. Maya snapped open one clasp, then the other. "Maya, stop!" Grandma said sharply. But the lid was already lifting. Inside were clothes from the SA blue dress with white flowers, a thick wool coat, leather shoes with sturdy heels. Everything looked almost new, as if packed weeks ago, not decades. Then Maya lifted a small brown leather book. "It's a diary," she said. "Look at this handwriting." She flipped open the cover and read aloud. "This diary belongs to Elena Martinez. March thus. I pray someday my daughter will read this and understand why I had to leave. My entire body went cold. Elena Martinez." That was my great-grandmother's name, but according to the stories I grew up hearing, she died in California giving birth to Grandma Rosa. Nothing about Alaska, nothing about cabins, nothing about running. I looked at Grandma again. Her eyes were wet, but she said nothing. Maya kept reading. March the cabin is almost finished. Carlos works so hard, I think we will be safe here. Frank will never find us in Alaska. Frank? There was no Frank in our family. I took the diary and flipped through. Every entry pulled the ground further out from under me. Elena wrote about living in the cabin with Carlos, about being pregnant, about being terrified, and about a man named Frank who was hunting for her. April 8th. Frank found our address. Carlos got a telegram. Frank is coming to Alaska. He says he will kill me before he lets me leave him. My hands shook as I read. I glanced at Grandma. She wasn't looking at me anymore. She was staring at the foundation stones like she could still see the cabin standing there. Another entry. April 10th. Carlos left to meet Frank at the train station. He wants to talk to him. Man to man. But Frank cannot be reasoned with. He nearly killed me twice in California. Then, April 10th, Carlos didn't come back. I heard a gunshot yesterday morning. I'm alone in the cabin. The baby is due soon. I keep hearing footsteps outside at night. Heavy boots. Frank found me. I stopped reading. The diary's words pressed on my chest like a weight. Grandma, I said quietly. Elena didn't die in childbirth, did she? Grandma Rosa lifted her face. Tears streamed down her cheeks. No, she whispered. She didn't. That night, no one spoke much. Maya tried reading more of the diary, but I took it away. The final entry was dated April the 6th. Elena wrote that Frank was circling the cabin, pacing, waiting. She hid her diary and suitcase beneath the floorboards just before he forced his way inside. That's where her words ended. That's where our nightmare began. Near midnight, I heard footsteps. Heavy. Slow, circling our tents. Exactly as Elena described. I sat up, heart pounding, listening to boots crunch the dirt, moving around and around the campsite. I unzipped my tent just enough to peek outside. No one was there. But the footsteps continued. They stopped right outside my tent. The air went still. My breath caught. And then the boots resumed walking, circling us again. In the morning, Uncle Dave found boot prints in the dirt. Old-style boots, heels worn, narrow, not modern at all. No one in our family owned anything like them. My dad muttered something about rangers checking on us, but he didn't believe it. None of us did. That afternoon, the permafrost around the foundation began melting faster than it should have. I'd been camping all my life. I knew natural thawing didn't happen like that. Items rose out of the softened ground, broken plates, fabric scraps, things untouched for years. Maya kept digging until she pulled up something she first thought was a stick. It wasn't a stick. It was human bone. An arm bone. I made everyone back away and called the Park Service. They said it could take a day or two to reach our remote site. That evening, I sat beside Grandma. Tell me everything, I said. All of it. Her voice shook as she spoke. Elena was my mother. Frank was my stepfather. Everyone thought he was a good man. He was a police officer in Sacramento. But he hid my mother. He hit me too. She closed her eyes, swallowing hard. When my mother and Carlos brought me to Alaska. They wanted a new life where Frank couldn't find us. But he had connections. He tracked us down. I waited, barely breathing. I was hiding in the woods when Frank came to the cabin, she whispered. I saw him kill my mother. Then he left. but he got lost trying to escape. He froze to death. Tears streamed down her face. I told everyone she died in childbirth. I told people Carlos died in an accident. No one would have believed me otherwise. Frank was a respected officer. I was just a scared child, my stomach twisted. Our family trips, the cabin foundation, the stories, everything had been a lie. That night the footsteps came back. This time everyone heard them. Heavy boots circling our tents, slow and purposeful. We huddled in the largest tent, listening as the sound went around and around in endless loops. "It's Frank," Grandma whispered. "He's still searching. He's still angry." In the morning, investigators arrived. They excavated the foundation carefully. They found Elena's skeleton first, exactly where the cabin floor would have been. Her skull was cracked, ribs broken, evidence of violence. 20 feet away, half buried in melted ice, they found another skeleton. A man in a Sacramento police uniform. Badge reading, Frank Morrison. The investigators said he likely died trying to hike out after killing Elena. His body froze, preserved for decades. Climate change had melted just enough permafrost to reveal both bodies. News outlets swarmed. National Park murder solved after years. CLI mate. Change uncovers cold case. Our family fell apart. My uncles were furious at Grandma. My aunt was horrified that we'd spent years camping on a murder site. My parents didn't know what to believe anymore. Grandma died 6 months later. Heart attack. But I think it was the truth that finally broke her. I inherited Elena's diary. I read it over and over until the pages felt like skin against my fingers. She was only when she died. She had run for her life, but it hadn't been enough. And the worst part, no one ever looked for her. Not the police, not her family, no one. After Grandma's funeral, I quit teaching. I couldn't stand in front of kids and preach honesty when my own family legacy was built on lies. I became a private investigator instead, working cold cases, helping families find answers. Something no one ever did for Elena. But there's something else, something that keeps me awake. We had 2 other family tradition camping spots, one in Oregon, one in Colorado. I've been researching them quietly. Both areas have reports of missing people from the SNS, people who vanished without explanation. I'm starting to think Frank Morrison didn't stop with my great-grandmother. I'm starting to think he hid more than one crime behind our family vacations. Climate change is melting ice everywhere. More things are beginning to surface. Old secrets, old bodies, old truths that refuse to stay buried. I don't know what else is waiting to be found. And I don't know if the footsteps we heard that night belonged to Frank's ghost, or if they were simply the sound of the past rising from the thawing ground, reminding us that the truth always finds a way out. My name is Patricia Williams, but everyone calls me Pat. I've been an ICU nurse for years, long enough to see the worst moments a human body can endure and the worst moments a human mind can break under. Memorial Hospital in Seattle became my second home the day I graduated from nursing school. And over the years, I've seen more car accidents, heart attacks, overdoses, and suffocating CO patients than I could ever count. I've held hands in final moments, pushed through chest compressions until my arms felt like they were tearing apart, started IV lines on veins that had collapsed from dehydration or drugs, and worked through the longest shifts of my life during the pandemic. I thought I knew everything about stress, trauma, and pressure. But what happened in September of last year in the isolated backcountry of Wrangell, Sankel, Elias National Park in Alaska proved that wilderness has its own version of terror, one that doesn't roar like a bear or freeze like the cold. It whispers from the silence, slowly convincing you that your own mind is the most dangerous predator you'll ever encounter. For years, I hadn't taken a real vacation. I gave myself long weekends from time to time, maybe a day in the mountains or a family cookout, but I never left Seattle for more than 2 days. Maybe it was guilt, maybe obligation, maybe fear that if I walked away from the ICU even briefly, something terrible would happen and I'd have to live with it forever. During COVID especially, the hospital became a battlefield. Families couldn't visit, so I held phones up to dying patients' ears while their loved ones sobbed through the speakers. I personally watched more people die alone than any human being should ever witness. After years of that, burnout wasn't just creeping in, it was devouring me. My supervisor, Linda, finally stepped in. She told me I wasn't allowed to pick up any more shifts. She said I was forgetting minor tasks, nothing life-threatening yet, but enough to prove that my brain was running on fumes. When an ICU nurse begins making little mistakes, the big ones are not far behind. She told me to take a real break. Not a weekend, not a day trip. She made me promise to disappear for at least 2 weeks with no emails, no hospital updates, no charting, no responsibility. I agreed, but only because I knew she was right. I was deteriorating, and in my field, that's a death sentence for someone. Before nursing consumed my entire existence, I used to hike every weekend. Backpacking, small solo trips, nothing extreme but enough to know I loved isolation. And when I thought about what kind of break I truly needed, I didn't want beaches or hotels or cities. I wanted silence. I wanted a place so remote no one could reach me, and I wouldn't hear a human voice for days. That's why I chose Wrangell St. Elias. It's the largest national park in the United States, larger than Switzerland. No roads, no trails, no facilities. Just mountains, glaciers, and tundra that feels like another planet. I spent months researching a remote mining route, 10 days in, 10 days out. Almost no hikers ever go there, perfect isolation. By the time I boarded a bush plane from Anchorage on September 3rd, I had brand new gear, a satellite GPS unit, a backup GPS watch, water purification tablets, 2 weeks of meals, a detailed map, and confidence built from studying the terrain until I could draw it in my sleep. The pilot, an old Alaskan named Tom, looked at my gear and raised an eyebrow. He asked if I was sure I wanted to go alone. He said in his 20 years of flying in Alaska, that area still made him nervous. I told him I had experience. I didn't tell him my longest solo trip had been 3 days. The first 2 days were bliss. The weather was crisp and cool, low 70s in the daylight and mid-30s at night. But the beauty, that was something else entirely. The mountains rose like frozen giants. The tundra glowed gold beneath the sun, and the streams were so clear I could see smooth pebbles resting on the bottom like polished glass. I felt myself healing with every step. No alarms, no monitors, no voices begging for help, no one dying. Only peace. I covered 10 miles a day, right on schedule, my GPS and maps agreeing perfectly. But on day 3, something shifted. I woke and immediately noticed the quiet. Real quiet, not forest quiet. Not rural quiet. A dead, crushing silence so absolute that I could hear my own pulse thumping in my ears. Seattle always has background noise traffic, airplanes, construction, sirens from the hospital. Even hiking in Washington, there were always distant sounds of life. But here there was nothing, not a twig snapping in the distance. Not a single bird call. I hadn't heard anything human-made in nearly 48 hours. At first I enjoyed it. Then the silence started pressing against me like weight. Every footstep sounded like an explosion. Even my breathing felt too loud. I found myself talking to fill the emptiness, just to hear a voice. Any voice. When I reached a ridgeline that afternoon, I pulled out my GPS, expecting another easy day of navigation. Instead, the device told me I was 5 miles south of where I should have been. My GPS watch disagreed entirely, placing me somewhere else. I assumed mountains were blocking the satellite signal. Alaska has notorious interference issues. I trusted my paper map instead. But by evening, the mining station that was supposed to be my campsite never appeared. According to my calculations, I should have reached it hours earlier. Now I was camping beside an unmarked stream, somewhere that didn't exist on any map I owned. Day 4 was worse. I climbed to high ground to get my bearings, but every direction looked the same. Rolling tundra, distant mountains, identical valleys. No landmarks. No distinct shapes. I remember that. My emergency beacon worked, but couldn't connect to satellites. My backup watch also failed. For the first time in my entire hiking life, I felt truly, terrifyingly lost. I tried backtracking, but the landscape devoured footprints and memory. Within an hour, I couldn't even tell which way I had come from. Everything looked repeated, copied and pasted, an endless loop of the same hills. I forced myself to think like a nurse, stay calm, assess, prioritize. Step 1, I was lost. Step 2, navigation devices failed. Step 3. Food for 6 more days if rationed. Solution: follow water downhill. Water leads to valleys. Valleys lead to lower elevation. Lower elevation leads eventually, hopefully, to people. By day 5, the stream splintered into a marsh, dividing into dozens of shallow channels. I picked one and followed it for hours, only to watch it disappear into a swamp. That's when the hallucinations began. Small at first movement at the edge of my vision, a shadow slipping behind a hill. The dark shape of a person in the distance. Every time I looked directly at it, nothing was there. I reminded myself that isolation, exhaustion, stress, and hunger can cause hallucinations. I had seen it in ICU patients. But understanding it didn't stop my fear. Day 6 brought the first spark of hope. A wooden structure emerged through fog. I practically ran toward it. A mining camp, abandoned, decaying but real. Crumbled buildings, rusted tools, a logbook. I flipped through pages written by miners from the 1900s. Then later entries, 1950, written by a hiker who had gotten lost. His words felt like my own thoughts bleeding onto the paper. Day 8. Can't find trail back. GPS not working. Everything looks the same. Day 10. Vastness getting inside my head. Seeing people who aren't there. Day 14. Nature didn't push miners out. This land eats you. Final entry. If someone finds this, tell my family I'm sorry. The mountains won't let me leave. Behind a collapsed building, I found bones. Old, sun-bleached, a jacket. A wallet. The same name from the logbook. That night, the camp creaked with phantom footsteps. Wind moaned through broken walls like whispered conversation. My flashlight showed nothing, but I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was standing just behind me in the dark. By day 7, I felt myself slipping. Logic said, stay at the camp and wait for rescue. My instinct screamed run. Move. Escape. I abandoned gear to lighten my pack. I wandered in whatever direction felt right. I started talking to people who weren't there. My mother, dead for 10 years, patients I'd lost, co-workers, the miner from the logbook. Their voices were clearer than the wind. Sometimes, I answered them as if we were sitting in a hospital break room. Day 8 was my breaking point. Sitting atop a barren hill staring at endless tundra, I convinced myself death would be easier. I wrote goodbye letters. But something deep inside me refused to surrender. My training returned: stabilize, assess, survive. I counted calories, water tablets, checked for signs of mental collapse. I talked myself through reality like calming a panicked patient. On day 9, I followed a stream with absolute focus. No hallucinations, no panic, just deliberate movement downward. On day 10, a valley opened up, and there, hidden until the last possible moment, was a dirt airstrip. Fresh tire tracks, fuel stains, a lifeline. I camped on the runway for 2 days before a supply pilot named Mike landed. When he saw me, he nearly fell out of the cockpit. I told him how long I'd been lost. He told me I'd been only 3 miles from a research station the entire time, but the landscape hides everything, he explained. It folds around you, blinds you, traps you. I survived. But survival is not the same as healing. Back in Seattle, the ICU felt huge. Too open, too empty. Too much like Alaska. Panic attacks started. I transferred to a smaller unit. 10 months later, I still can't handle wide open spaces or big skies. Alaska taught me something brutal. The wilderness doesn't have to kill your body to defeat you. It only has to convince you that you are nothing, invisible, forgotten. The land doesn't break bones, it breaks minds. And even once you escape it, part of you never fully comes back. My name is Miguel Santos, and I've been fixing cars for years. I started when I was just a kid, working weekends at my uncle's shop in Anchorage. By 18, I'd earned my ASSC certification, and now I run my own garage downtown. Engines, transmissions, beat-up trucks, fancy sports cars. I've rebuilt them all. I thought danger lived under the hood. But whatever I faced during spring break at Glacier Bay didn't come from a machine. It came from something far older than anything made by human hands. Sarah, my wife, had been planning that trip for months. She wanted to take our son, Tommy, somewhere special for spring break. She works as a school secretary and kept hearing teachers talk about Glacier Bay National Park. The glaciers, the mountains, the ocean, the campgrounds right on the water. Tommy had never seen a glacier. He's been reading books about ice ages, Sarah said as she showed me the brochure. He'll love it. And you've been working too hard. We need this. She was right. I'd been pulling 12-hour days at the shop, trying to build up a college fund for Tommy. My hands were always stained with oil and cuts. A week away sounded perfect. We packed up my Ford F-250 with all the camping gear. I grabbed my toolkit like I always do. You never know. Tommy bounced around the truck the whole morning, asking every question he could think of about glaciers. The drive took hours. Sarah slept for most of it, and Tommy pressed his face against the window, watching the city fade into endless wilderness. When we finally saw our first glacier in the distance, he shouted so loud he startled Sarah awake. "Dad! It's blue. Can we take some ice home?" I laughed. "We'll see, buddy. Let's get camp set up first." Our campsite at Bartlett Cove was incredible, right on the water, with glaciers visible across the bay. Every few minutes, a loud crack echoed as pieces of ice broke off and collapsed into the ocean. Tommy couldn't stop staring. A small creek ran behind our site, about 20 yards from the tent. The water was unbelievably clear, rushing fast with glacier melt. It had this strange blue-green glow when the sun hit it. I figured that was just how glacier water looked. I'd never seen it in person before. "This water looks so clean," Sarah said, crouching by the creek. Like nature's sports drink. Tommy immediately wanted to fill his bottles. Sarah said we should stick to the bottled water we brought, but Tommy kept asking why we couldn't drink glacier water if it looked so clean. "People drank from streams for thousands of years," I told her. "We'll boil it anyway." That was my first mistake. We used the creek water for everything that evening. Cooking, washing dishes, brushing our teeth. Tommy drank 3 bottles of it. He kept saying it tasted sweet, almost like candy. I thought he was just excited. I used it to wash my hands after setting up the camp stove, and the cold felt good. But an hour later, my hands were itching like crazy. Small red bumps appeared across my fingers and wrists. I thought it was the dry, cold air. Sarah cooked spaghetti on the camp stove. We boiled the pasta in the creek water. Tommy devoured 2 bowls, then kept sipping more glacier water. When the sun went down, Sarah and I shared a bottle of wine, trying to relax after the long drive. 2 hours later, Sarah complained of stomach cramps. "Probably the camping food," she muttered, rubbing her stomach. She took antacids and crawled into the tent early. Tommy stayed wide awake, asking if we could hike to the glaciers the next day. I tucked him in and sat by the fire, listening to the distant cracks of falling ice. The rash on my hands kept getting worse. I washed again with creek water, thinking it would help. It didn't. Around midnight, I woke to the sound of Sarah vomiting outside. When I shined my flashlight, her vomit had a faint blue tint. I'd never seen anything like it. "I feel awful," she whispered. "My stomach is burning." I gave her water and helped her back inside. Tommy slept soundly, still hugging one of his bottles. I woke up feeling like I'd been hit by a truck. The rash had spread up my arms, and the itching was unbearable. My skull felt like it was being squeezed in a vice. Even the sunlight seeping through the tent hurt my eyes so badly I had to wear sunglasses inside. Sarah was worse. Her cramps were so intense she could barely straighten her back. She tried to eat but threw up the same blue stuff. But Tommy was fine. More than fine. He was sharper than I had ever seen him. He asked about glacier formation using words I didn't think an 8-year-old knew. "Dad," he said while sipping more creek water, "did you know glaciers hold microscopic organisms that have been frozen for thousands of years? They're like ancient time capsules." I stared at him. "Where'd you learn that?" He shrugged. "I just know it now." A chill ran down my spine. I told them we were leaving early. Sarah was too sick for a long drive, but I figured we could get her to a town, a clinic, anything. Tommy argued. "I don't want to leave. The water is making me smarter." I can think so clearly. The calm, mature tone in his voice made my stomach drop. I left them at the campsite and drove to the ranger station, even though my vision was starting to blur around the edges. Shadows flickered where nothing should have been, but I made it. "Ranger Johnson, An older guy who'd worked Glacier Bay for years listened closely as I explained everything. His face tightened. "You all used water from the creek?" "Yeah," I said. "Is that bad?" He pulled a thick folder from his desk. "We've had 3 other families report similar symptoms. All of them drank from glacier-fed streams." He explained how rapidly melting glaciers were releasing ancient organisms, bacteria and microorganisms that had been frozen for ages. "They're not harmful to wildlife," he said, "but humans have no immunity. They affect the nervous system and brain." My hands shook. "What happens to people who drink it?" "We don't know yet. The other families were evacuated." Symptoms progressed fast. I rushed back. My vision sharpened unnaturally. I could see individual leaves on trees far away, tiny animals moving in the brush. The world looked too clear. When I returned, I found Sarah unconscious by the creek. Her skin had a blue tint now, spreading like ink under the surface. It was coming from her veins, as if something blue was flowing through her blood. Tommy sat beside her, calm as ever. "She's changing," he said. "The organisms are upgrading her nervous system." The way he spoke, flat, analytical, almost emotionless, terrified me more than Sarah's condition. I loaded both of them into the truck and floored it toward Anchorage. The nearest hospital was miles away. Minutes into the drive, Sarah woke up, but when she looked at me, her eyes were blank. "Who are you?" she asked. "Where am I?" "Sarah, it's me, Miguel." "Your husband." She looked at Tommy. "Who is this small human?" Tommy smiled. "Don't worry, Mom. Your confusion is temporary. Your brain is being rewired." She suddenly tried to open the truck door while we were going 60 miles an hour. I had to fight to keep her inside while she clawed at the handle with inhuman strength. "The organisms are making us better," Tommy said calmly. "We're evolving." My headache turned unbearable, but my vision kept improving, almost too sharp. I could see road signs from miles away. I could track individual raindrops sliding down the windshield. Thoughts that weren't mine crept into my head. Mechanical concepts, chemistry, calculations I'd never understood before. It was like someone was rewriting my brain. Tommy caught 3 flies in midair with reflexes far beyond human. He solved complicated math problems out loud, faster than I could process them. "Dad," he said, "internal combustion engines are primitive. I can see multiple ways to improve your truck's thermodynamic efficiency just by analyzing the vibration patterns." Sarah's body changed faster. The blue tint spread across her entire skin. She stopped speaking English and made clicking and humming sounds, patterns that felt like language even though I'd never heard anything like them. At the Anchorage hospital, doctors immediately put us in isolation. They had no idea what they were dealing with. The CDC arrived within hours. Blood tests showed the organisms were multiplying fast, altering our DNA in real time. Sarah lost her ability to understand human concepts. She stared at light switches like they were alien technology. Tommy's reflexes became superhuman, but his emotions were fading. If I tried to hug him, he analyzed my posture instead of hugging back. He told the doctors, using the vocabulary of a professor, that climate change was releasing ancient organisms from melting ice. "We're experiencing directed evolution," he said. I held on to my human memories the longest, but I felt them slipping. My childhood. My wedding. The smell of motor oil. The pride of fixing an engine. All of it was being overwritten with cold, precise knowledge. Within a month, the park shut down quietly. The official reason was environmental maintenance, but CDC teams in hazmat suits were everywhere, gathering water samples. My last human memory is hearing Dr. Martinez talking on the phone. Similar cases are appearing across Alaska, Canada, Greenland. Climate change isn't just melting ice. It's releasing evolution. After that, I don't remember being Miguel. The organisms finished their work. Whatever I became can understand the world in ways humans never could. But I can't remember love, or pride, or family. Sometimes I wonder if the 3 of us are still somewhere, changed into something unrecognizable. And I wonder how many more families will drink from glacier streams as Alaska's ancient ice continues melting, releasing evolution one campsite at a time. My name is Jake Rodriguez, and I've been the night manager at Morrison's Grocery for years now. I started when I was fresh out of high school, barely 18, stocking shelves, dealing with the graveyard shift chaos, ringing up late-night weirdos who lived off energy drinks and scratcher lottery tickets. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid better than anything else in Phoenix, and more importantly, I had a goal. Every paycheck, I saved a little. I wasn't saving for a car, college, or some apartment upgrade. I was saving for something bigger. Something that had shaped my imagination ever since I was a kid stuck in a two-bedroom apartment with parents who worked themselves to exhaustion. I wanted a real hunting trip. Alaska. Growing up in the desert meant my wilderness experience was limited to saguaros and lizards. My dad worked construction, my mom cleaned offices at night. I didn't come from a family that could afford expensive outdoor hobbies. But that never stopped me. I watched every hunting documentary I could find, read magazines until the pages tore, memorized caribou migration patterns, and spent night after night learning wilderness navigation from online forums. It wasn't just a dream. It became an obsession. I wanted to prove that a grocery store kid from Phoenix, someone nobody expected to be anything special, could survive in the real wild. After nearly a year of saving, I finally had enough money. A solo hunting trip to Kobuk Valley National Park. 2 full weeks alone in the Alaskan wilderness, hunting caribou. Every one of my coworkers told me I was insane. "Jake, you've never even been camping," Maria from day shift said, shaking her head. But I'd done the work. I bought 2 GPS units, a satellite communicator, proper cold weather clothing, hunting licenses, and more freeze-dried meals than my pantry had ever seen. I studied topographic maps until the lines blurred, practiced setting up my tent in my apartment living room, and learned how to field dress games strictly from YouTube tutorials. I was as prepared as I could be. Frank Wilson was my bush pilot, a weathered man in his 60s who had flown hunters into the interior of Alaska for 3 decades. When I met him at the tiny airstrip in Kotzebue, he studied me like someone inspecting a used car they weren't quite sure would survive the highway. "You sure about this, kid?" he asked, loading my gear into his Cessna. That's pretty remote country. No cell service. No roads. Nothing but wilderness for miles. I told him I'd been planning it for years, trying to sound confident. Frank didn't look convinced. "I've dropped off 2 other solo hunters in that area these past few years," he said quietly. Neither one made it to their pickup date. I stared at him, thrown off. "What do you mean?" "They vanished. Campsites gone. Gear gone. No signs of an animal attack. Nothing." He paused, watching my face. "You really want to go alone?" I brushed it off. People disappeared in the wilderness all the time. Bears, hypothermia, falls, anything could happen. I wasn't going to let fear ruin the trip I'd dreamed of my entire life. "I'm prepared," I said firmly. Frank reluctantly agreed. During the long flight over tundra and endless forests, he pointed out landmarks and weather patterns, warning me about places even experienced hunters avoided. But I was too excited to be scared. From the air, the land looked untouched, infinite, beautiful. No roads. No cabins. Nothing but raw nature stretching beyond the horizon. When we landed on a remote lake shore, Frank helped me unload my gear. The silence hit me immediately. No engines, no buzzing street lamps, no distant traffic. Just wind and water and open space. It felt like stepping into another world. "You sure?" Frank asked again. "I can take you back right now." "I'm good," I said. "See you in 2 weeks." He took off, and when the plane disappeared into the sky, the silence transformed from magical to overwhelming. I was alone, completely alone. The first 3 days were perfect. I set up my camp overlooking the lake, organized everything with the same methodical mindset I used at the store, then started hunting. The landscape was breathtaking, rolling tundra, small lakes reflecting the sky, and caribou tracks everywhere. I watched the northern lights dance at night like glowing rivers across the darkness. On day 3, I shot my first caribou. Field dressing it was messier and more difficult than every YouTube video made it look, but I managed. The meat tasted incredible, cooked over my camp stove. I felt proud, powerful. I'd done it. A kid from Phoenix surviving Alaska. On day 4, everything changed. I was exploring about 2 miles from my camp when I noticed a small valley with a tent in it. At first, I was excited, thinking it might be another hunter. Someone to talk to, maybe trade stories with. But the closer I got, the more wrong everything felt. The tent was partially collapsed. Expensive gear was scattered everywhere. A high-end rifle lay in the dirt with its scope shattered. No sign of the owner, I called out. My voice echoed back at me through the valley. The campsite looked recently abandoned, maybe days old. I found a hunting license in a wallet on the ground. David Chen from California. His license was valid for this exact season. That's when I noticed the blood. Dark stains smeared across the tent fabric, more on the nearby gear, and dried marks leading away from the site toward a rocky ridge. My stomach twisted. This wasn't a bear attack. The gear would have been shredded, not thrown around like someone left in a hurry. This felt deliberate. Organized. Human. I grabbed my satellite communicator. Message failed to send. Tried again. Failed. My GPS flickered, showing my location jumping miles at a time. All the equipment that worked perfectly for days was suddenly malfunctioning at the exact moment I needed it most. That night, I barely slept. Every snap of a twig made me jolt upright, gripping my rifle. Every gust of wind scraping against the tent felt like footsteps. I kept thinking of Frank's warning. Those hunters who vanished. How no one ever found their camps. On day 5, I decided I was done. I was leaving early. I'd hike to my pickup location and wait there. I didn't care if it meant sitting for a week. I was breaking down my tent when I heard footsteps behind me. Morning there, friend. I spun around, heart slamming in my chest. A man was walking toward my camp, mid-40s, beard, weathered face, wearing hunting clothes. He carried a rifle casually over one shoulder and smiled like we were neighbors meeting at the mailbox. Name's Ray, he said. Ray Hutchkins. Local trapper. Saw your camp yesterday, figured I'd check on you. Everything about him seemed normal, his tone friendly, his body language relaxed. But my nerves were too raw to trust anyone. Jake, I said. I'm actually packing to head out early. Oh, trouble with the hunting? He asked. No, got a caribou. Just ready to go home. Ray nodded knowingly. First time in real wilderness, huh? Can be overwhelming. Want help navigating out? This country can be tricky. I was about to answer when something caught my eye. Ray was wearing a GPS watch. The exact same model, same distinctive orange band as the one I'd seen at David Chen's abandoned campsite. My stomach dropped. Where'd you get that watch? I asked casually. Ray glanced at it. This old thing? Found it lying around. Hunters lose stuff out here all the time. He was lying. I could feel it in my bones. His eyes had changed. No warmth, no friendliness. Just cold calculation. Now I noticed the rest. Multiple hunting licenses clipped to his backpack. Different names. Scratches on his rifle that looked like it had been dropped during a struggle. You know, Ray continued, his voice light, almost amused. I've been keeping an eye on solo hunters in this area for years. Amazing how many of them disappear. My hand drifted toward the bear spray on my belt. This is perfect country for someone like me, he said, smile fading into something dead and empty. No roads, no cell towers. No witnesses. A man can do whatever he wants out here. My blood turned to ice. You're gonna run now, Ray said matter-of-factly. They always run. I ran. Ray didn't chase immediately. He wanted me scared, stumbling, predictable. I could hear his laughter drifting across the tundra long after I left camp. I wasn't a hunter anymore. I was prey. I forced myself to stop after half a mile. Panic wouldn't save me. At the store, during emergencies, power outages, system crashes, violent customers, I had to stay calm, think systematically. I needed that same mindset now. Ray had terrain knowledge, military experience, and probably hidden weapon caches. But I had something too. Strategy. Logistics. Planning. The ability to think under pressure. Instead of running blindly, I moved with intent. Used terrain to hide my tracks. Rationed every drop of water. Studied the land, the wind direction, the caribou trails. If Ray wanted to hunt me, I'd force him into my game instead of his. Over the next 48 hours, I turned every trick I'd ever learned. Every scrap of survival knowledge, every pattern recognition skill from years of managing chaos into a weapon. I set snares meant for big game, but redesigned for a human step. Built a deadfall trap using logs and heavy rocks. I stopped thinking like a scared kid. I started thinking like someone fighting for his life. On day 7, Ray walked right into my deadfall. The crash echoed across the valley, followed by a scream of pain. I ran toward the sound, keeping low, rifle ready. Ray was pinned beneath a massive boulder. His leg was twisted at an impossible angle, bone showing through torn fabric. But his eyes, those dead predator eyes, were still burning with hatred. "You little piece of garbage," he snarled, trying to crawl toward his rifle. "You think you're smart? I've killed 19 hunters in this valley. You're just going to be number 20. A cold wave washed over me. 19! Ray wasn't a random killer. He was a serial murderer who'd turned the Alaskan wilderness into his personal hunting preserve. The missing hunters Frank mentioned weren't unlucky. They were hunted. Ray dragged himself another inch. "Military sniper," he spat out. 2 tours in Afghanistan. Got addicted to the hunt. Over there, they pulled me out. But here? Here, I can hunt forever. He reached for his rifle. I grabbed mine first. For a moment, we stared at each other. Me, a grocery store manager, shaking, terrified. Him, a broken monster who'd butchered people for the thrill. "You won't do it," Ray said coldly. "You're not a killer. Just a scared kid pretending to be a man." He was wrong. The gunshot echoed across the silent valley. The next day, using Ray's own maps, I found his cave system. What I saw inside will haunt me until the day I die. Piles of personal items, watches, wallets, wedding rings. Hunting tags from victims. Journals filled with victims' final entries as Ray stalked them. He had studied them like test subjects, perfecting his craft with each kill. When Frank returned on day 14, I was waiting at the coordinates with Ray's evidence packed in waterproof bags. Alaska State Troopers arrived within hours. They recovered bodies for weeks afterward, some almost a decade old. The media exploded. Headlines everywhere. Night manager turns tables on Alaska serial killer. When I returned to Phoenix, I quit my job at the grocery store. The aisles felt too bright, the people too close. The noise unbearable. The kid who'd gone to Alaska to prove himself didn't return. Someone harder did. Someone who had seen too much. Now I work in a small outdoor gear shop in Flagstaff. It's quiet. Simple. I help other people prepare for wilderness trips. I always tell them the truth. It's not the weather you should fear. It's not the animals. It's not the darkness. Sometimes the most dangerous predator in the wild walks on 2 legs. And some nights, when the nightmares come, I see Ray's eyes again. Not from when he chased me, not from when he lay dying, but the instant I realized what I had to become to survive him. That moment is the one that never leaves me. My name is Tom Bradley, and I've been a park ranger at Denali National Park for years, long enough to think I'd seen everything Alaska's wilderness could throw at a man. I started straight out of college with a wildlife management degree, imagining a life spent tracking caribou migrations and teaching tourists how not to get themselves mauled by grizzlies. In 2 decades, I've handled lost hikers, aggressive bears, medical emergencies, and search and rescue missions in terrain that eats the unprepared alive. I've hauled people out of crevasses, treated hypothermia cases, and stopped more than one idiot from trying to scare off a moose with bravado and bare hands. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for what happened last September in the remote backcountry. It forced me to confront something no ranger handbook ever mentioned, something ancient that walks these mountains and watches us with patient, predatory intelligence. The trouble started on a Tuesday morning. I had just sat down in the Eelson Visitor Center with my supervisor to go over routine incident reports when the radio crackled twice in quick succession. Then a third time. 3 separate camping groups had called the ranger station overnight, all reporting the same impossible thing. Something had stalked their campsites. Not a bear, not a wolf. Something upright, heavy, deliberate. Something that moved like a person but wasn't human. I tried not to jump to conclusions. The first detailed report came from an Oregon family camping near the Savage River. Around midnight, footsteps circled their tent. Heavy, slow, intentional. Every time they unzipped the tent to shine a light, the footsteps stopped, but the presence never retreated. The father swore he'd seen a silhouette at least 9 or 10 feet tall, covered in dark fur, with glowing yellow eyes that reflected his flashlight beam. I tried to steady my voice when I told them it was probably a brown bear rearing on its hind legs, an intimidating sight in the dark. But before my reassurance settled in my own mind, the second report came through. A group of seasoned backpackers near Polychrome Pass described the exact same figure. These weren't wide-eyed tourists. These were people who'd spent years outdoors. They knew the difference between a bear and something else entirely. The third report rattled me more than the others. It came from a solo hiker camping illegally near Wonder Lake. His voice shook through the radio. He claimed something had mimicked his dead brother's voice from the tree line, calling in by name, luring him toward the darkness. My supervisor raised an eyebrow at me, but I was already grabbing my field kit. Something was happening out there, and I needed to see it firsthand. The drive to the Oregon family's campsite took about 40 minutes. Early fall colors brushed the tundra, but the deeper I drove into the valley, the more unsettling the silence became. No ground squirrels darting across the road. No ptarmigan fluttering up from the brush. Even the ravens, those loud, opportunistic scavengers, were absent. The landscape felt hollowed out. At the campsite, the family had already packed and fled, but what they left behind chilled me. Footprints circled the tent site. Not bear tracks, not anything I recognized. These prints were humanoid 5, distinct toes, and what looked disturbingly like an opposable thumb. Each print measured nearly 18 inches long, pressed deep into the earth, as if made by something weighing 500 or 600 pounds. I made plaster casts the way protocol dictated, but as I knelt in the dirt, a realization crept over me. The footprints weren't random. Each step avoided dry leaves. Each position stayed in the shadows. Something had moved with stealth, deliberately minimizing sound. Bears don't do that. Nearby trees bore claw marks about 9 feet high. At first, that didn't shock me. A large brown bear can reach that height. But these scratches didn't match typical territorial markings. They formed crude geometric patterns, simplistic but intentional. I photographed everything, logged the coordinates, then drove toward Polychrome Pass. The second campsite told the same story. Footprints, tree scratches, total absence of normal wildlife. My radio crackled with static as I tried to contact the station, something that had never happened in that area before. A knot tightened in my chest. That night, I found myself thinking about the stories Athabascan elders shared during cultural programs. Legends about beings called Kushtaka shapeshifters who mimicked human voices to lure people away. I'd always considered those tales folklore, nothing more, but Elder Mary Tian once pulled me aside after a presentation, gripping my arm with surprising strength as she told me, "Some places in these mountains are not for us." The old ones still live there. They watch. They remember. The next morning, I visited Mary's cabin near the park boundary. When I described the prints and markings, her weathered face went pale. "You found Kushtaka sign," she said, voice low. "They are angry. Too many people trespass. Too much disrespect." I tried to protest, tried to cling to the scientific world I understood, but Mary cut me off with a humorless laugh. "Stories? My grandfather saw them. My father saw them. I have seen them. They think, they plan, and they are old, Tom. Older than you can imagine." Over the next few weeks, the incidents escalated. Trail markers were found uprooted, not weather damaged, but systematically dismantled. Signs were repositioned to send hikers in the wrong direction. Emergency supply caches were opened but not looted, just rendered useless. Something was trying to get people lost. When I briefed my supervisor, Jim Kowalski, he frowned and rubbed his temples. "Tom, you're basically talking about Bigfoot." "We can't put that in an official report." "I wasn't talking about Bigfoot. I was talking about deliberate sabotage." Still, he refused to consider closing backcountry areas. I pushed for permission to install motion-activated trail cameras. He agreed reluctantly. 2 weeks later, I retrieved the first batch of footage. Most cameras showed ordinary wildlife. But camera 6 captured something I can't forget. At 3 in the morning, a massive figure walked upright through the frame, not stumbling like a bear trying to balance, but with the confident, fluid gait of something built for bipedal movement. Dark fur absorbed the infrared light. Broad shoulders swayed in rhythm. The proportions were wrong for any known animal. I enhanced the footage as much as possible. A partial profile appeared. Prominent brow ridge, elongated jaw, eyes that glinted with awareness. I watched the footage a dozen times before locking it away. Camera 9 captured the same creature 12 days later near a remote maintenance cabin. It circled the structure for hours, studying windows and doors. It tested the handle, found it locked, then checked each window methodically until it located a loose one. It didn't break in. It simply learned. It was gathering intelligence. Then the disappearances began. Day hikers who never returned. Experienced backpackers whose GPS beacons suddenly died. Search teams found belongings scattered along trails, boots, maps, torn pieces of fabric, but no bodies. I started plotting the disappearances on a map. Every incident clustered around the areas where I found the signs. 3 days into tracking a fresh set of prints near Wonder Lake, I stumbled upon a cave partially concealed by fallen rocks. A foul smell drifted from the darkness. Animal musk mixed with something that made my stomach twist. I clicked on my flashlight and stepped inside. The cave stretched deep into the mountains, swallowing the beam of my light. But what lay scattered across the floor stopped me cold. Human belongings. Hiking packs, boots, camping gear, some nearly new, some decades old. Metal canteens that hadn't been manufactured since the late 70s. Faded clothing. Outdated compass models. Driver's licenses dating back 40 years. People had been disappearing in this area for decades, and their belongings had been collected, preserved, sorted. Then I found the bones. Human bones. Cleaned, polished, arranged into piles by type skulls in one cluster, femurs in another. No scavenger does that. Something with hands and understanding had done this. As I raised my camera to document the scene, footsteps echoed behind me. I spun around, and my breath froze. A massive figure stood at the entrance. Taller than I'd imagined. 8.5 feet, maybe more, covered in coarse dark fur. Shoulders like boulders. Arms long enough to touch its knees. But it was the eyes that destroyed any illusion that this was just an animal. Intelligent, curious, calculating. It stepped toward me, head cocked like it was studying a strange new creature. I didn't move. My instincts screamed to run, but some deeper survival reflex kept me still. The creature leaned close enough that I could smell its breath, meat, earth, and something wild that clawed at the fear centers of my brain. It touched my radio. With perfect accuracy, it lifted it from my belt, held it to its mouth, and spoke into it using my voice. Base station, this is Ranger Bradley. Everything's normal out here? My blood turned ice. It had been listening to Ranger communications. It understood our language. It understood our equipment. It knew how to mimic us. Then more footsteps echoed from deeper in the cave. 5 or 6 shapes emerged. Smaller ones, larger ones. A family unit. They surrounded me not in aggression, but in assessment. I was prey, but not yet chosen. The largest one handed my radio back, but kept my GPS and emergency beacon. The message was unmistakable. We know where you are, not the other way around. I backed out step by controlled step until I felt daylight on my skin. Then I turned and walked. Didn't run for hours until I reached my truck. My mind was numb. My hands shook. I filed a report that night, complete with photos, coordinates, and casts of the prints. Jim read it silently. Then he locked it in his desk drawer. Tom, this never happened. We can't let something like this get out. It'll destroy tourism and create mass panic. A week later, I was reassigned to administrative duty in Anchorage. Career development, they said. Everyone knew the truth. The disappearances continue. Officially, they're blamed on bears or environmental hazards. The cave system I found has been quietly restricted. No public explanation. I still wonder if the creatures watch us the way we watch wildlife, studying, learning, waiting. Denali is vast, ancient, and largely untouched. A perfect place for old things to hide. Old things that remember when this land belonged to them. The wilderness isn't empty. It's just very, very good at keeping its secrets. My name is Elena Vasquez, and for years I lived my life behind a camera, chasing wildlife across the world. I started right after college with a beat-up camera, a cheap backpack, and a dream of one day shooting for National Geographic. Since then, I've spent nights freezing inside blinds too small to stand in, survived being charged by furious elephants in Kenya, and once waited 36 straight hours at 14,000 feet just to capture a snow leopard slipping across the Tibetan slopes. I thought I understood the dangers of the natural world. I thought the worst thing I'd ever face would be a territorial grizzly or a turn in the weather. But what happened last September in Katmai National Park shattered those assumptions. There are things out there that no camera can really capture. Things that should not exist yet, somehow do. The assignment looked perfect when it hit my inbox. National Geographic wanted a photo series on how Alaskan brown bears were adapting to climate change. 3 weeks in Katmai, good pay, familiar terrain. I'd photographed there twice before and knew the network of trails, rivers, and salmon runs like my own backyard. I flew into King Salmon on September 10th, then took a small bush plane into Brooks Camp. The air was strangely warm for fall, the kind of warmth that makes the forest feel tense and restless, but it fit the climate change angle well. Most tourists had already left, which meant the wilderness would be nearly empty. Perfect for work, perfect for silence. My plan was simple: set up a network of remote trail cameras, high-end Reckonix units with infrared night vision, motion sensors, and GPS tracking. Each one was worth more than my first car. The batteries would last weeks, and the footage would beam back to my laptop through a satellite uplink. On the first 2 days, I hiked more than 30 miles, placing cameras along bear trails, salmon routes, berry thickets, and marking trees. Every camera was locked in steel housings and chained tight, because I'd learned the hard way that curious bears could destroy gear worth several months of rent. By day 3, everything was online. From the comfort of my tent, I could watch live feeds of wilderness miles away. I still get chills thinking about how excited I was that night, how thrilled I felt watching the wild in front of me. That excitement lasted until around 10 p.m., when camera 3 caught motion near a spawning stream. A massive male brown bear ambled into frame. At first, nothing seemed unusual. Huge shoulders, thick fur, classic Katmai giant. But something about the way he moved made my stomach tighten. Bears have a distinctive rolling gait. Their heads sway, their weight shifts heavily. But this bear walked differently, quietly, deliberately. Every step too smooth, too calculated, almost like someone mimicking a bear's movement. I tried to shrug it off. Bears adapt. Bears learn. Maybe this one was unusually cautious around cameras. But 10 minutes later, when I checked the feed from camera 9 miles away, I froze. The same bear. Same scar on the right flank. Same thick, dark coat. Same strange, even stride. The timestamps matched. 10 minutes. No bear on Earth could cover 9 miles of rough Katmai wilderness in 10 minutes. It was impossible. My first instinct was equipment malfunction. A glitch. Maybe a GPS drift or a clock error. But these were top-tier units, calibrated personally. They didn't just break. I decided to monitor that specific bear closely. Digging into local logs, I found mentions of a creature the Inupiat guides called the Wanderer, a bear supposedly spotted across impossible distances for nearly 80 years. Rangers dismissed it as mistaken identities. I would have too, a week earlier. The next morning, I checked camera 3 in person. Everything was perfect, chains intact, housing undamaged, LEDs normal. But around the base of the tree, I found tracks that made my blood turn cold. They looked like bear prints, but wrong. The claw marks were too precise, evenly spaced as though carved with intention. And in some prints, the toes looked disturbingly like fingers. That evening, I talked with Tommy Inori, a senior Inupiat guide who'd worked Katmai for decades. When I described the bear, he grew quiet. "You're asking about the Wanderer," he said. His voice held no doubt. My grandfather used to tell stories about iris spirits that take the shape of animals but keep something human inside. Not animal, not human, something between. I rolled my eyes internally. I needed hard facts, not folklore. But the seriousness in Tommy's voice lingered with me. That night, I downloaded all the footage from the week and analyzed it frame by frame. The more I watched, the worse it got. The bear, if it was a bear, moved strangely in almost every clip. In several videos, it stood upright for unnervingly long periods, examining my cameras with human curiosity. And its eyes? They reflected light unlike any bear I'd ever seen. Not wild, not animal, almost human. But the worst footage came from camera 12. It had captured what looked like the wanderer living with a normal female bear and 2 cubs. A bear family, except everything about them was wrong. The cubs stayed unnaturally far from their father, skittish and afraid. The wanderer behaved like a sentinel, never sleeping, always watching, and when he ate salmon, he used his paws like hands, cleaning the fish with deliberate precision. Once, he even picked up a stone and used it like a tool to crack a skull open. Bears do not do that. I had to see it with my own eyes. On September 22nd, I hiked 7 miles to their valley with my best telephoto lens and set up a hide 200 yards away. All day I watched. My heart pounded constantly, waiting for something to make sense. But it didn't. The creature moved in ways no bear should, watching the cubs with an expression I can only describe as studied curiosity, like it was learning how to be a father instead of simply being one. Around noon, the female suddenly stiffened. She sniffed the air, turned toward my hiding spot, and made a sound I had never heard a bear make. Low, modulated, almost shaped into syllables. The wanderer stood upright. Then he turned toward me and spoke. Elena, my name, spoken clearly. In a voice that hit me like a physical blow. Maria's voice. My sister's voice. My sister who died 2 years earlier. I dropped my camera, scrambled out of the hide, and ran until my lungs screamed. I stumbled into camp long after sunset, shaking, refusing to believe what I'd heard. Stress, exhaustion, the isolation, maybe they'd twisted my perception, but when I checked the audio that night, my blood iced over. It was unmistakable. Maria's voice calling my name from a creature that wasn't human. That night, long after midnight, I heard Maria again, right outside my tent. Elena, por favor, don't leave me alone. Her accent, her mixture of Spanish and English. Her trembling emotion. Perfect. Impossible. I looked outside with my flashlight. The ground was soft, and the prints around my tent told a story more horrifying than the voice itself. Enormous bear tracks mixed with human footprints, not boots. Bare feet. Too large. Too long. The next morning, every piece of camera gear I owned had been moved. Not stolen, organized. Lenses grouped by focal length. Batteries arranged by charge level. Memory cards stacked in precise columns. No bear could do that. No bear would want to. I set up a night vision camera aimed directly at my gear. What I filmed at 2:43 a.m. still haunts me. The wanderer approached in full bear form, then began to change. Its limbs stretched, its fur melted like smoke. Bones twisted and lengthened beneath the skin. The creature reshaped itself into something halfway between human and bear, tall, hunched, covered in dark fur, with arms too long and a face almost human except for predatory bear eyes. And then it began to practice speaking. Elena. Elena, please don't go. Sometimes Maria's voice. Sometimes a man's, sometimes a child's. Voices I recognized from missing person bulletins in the region. Those people had vanished in Katmai. Their voices were in this creature's mouth. I packed at dawn, desperate to leave. But when I reached the trail back to the airstrip, the wanderer was waiting. It shifted uncontrollably as it approached. Bare limbs, human limbs, something in between, like it couldn't decide what form to use. It spoke in Maria's voice again, this time with heartbreaking emotion. Don't leave me alone, Hermana. I've been waiting for you. For a heartbeat, I almost believed it. The guilt of losing Maria, the ache I still carried, it reached straight into that wound. But then I saw its eyes. A perfect replica of my sister's face, with a predator's eyes buried inside it. I lifted my camera and triggered the flash at full power. The burst of light made the thing recoil in agony, its form warping violently as though the transformation had been disrupted. I ran for the river. The creature crashed through the brush behind me, screaming with a sound that didn't belong in any world, half-human wail, half-animal roar. When I hit the water, the current swept me away. The last thing I saw before the rapids took me was the creature standing at the riverbank, its shape collapsing and reforming uncontrollably. Maria's face stretching over a bear's skull, reaching toward me with hands that were too long. I made it to my pickup point. I boarded my scheduled flight. I turned over my footage. The authorities called it a hoax, a hallucination, a mental break brought on by exhaustion. But I know what I saw. I know what followed me through those woods. I know what spoke with stolen voices. I quit wildlife photography. I can't go back to the silence of remote places. I can't trust shadows anymore. Sometimes, late at night, I still hear Maria calling my name, and I have to remind myself over and over that my sister is dead. Whatever stood in that valley wearing her voice was something else entirely. If you ever work alone in the wilderness, any wilderness, listen to your instincts. If the world feels wrong, if voices come from the wrong places, if someone familiar appears where they shouldn't be, don't investigate. Run. Some things out there are better left undocumented.